Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call to order the City of Santa Rosa Planning Commission meeting for August 11th and ask for a roll call, please.
Let the record reflect that all commissioners are present except for Commissioner Dipple, Duggan, and Groninger, who are absent.
Okay, thank you. Next, we move to the approval of minutes for our July 28th meeting. Any corrections to those minutes? No. So those will stand as printed. Moving right along to public appearances, which is a time for any member of the public to come down and address the commission on matters of interest to the commission that aren't listed as a public hearing tonight. I have one card for Dwayne DeWitt, so I'll go ahead and open public appearances.
Hello, my name is Dwayne DeWitt from Roseland. I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today, ask you a couple questions, and basically point out that you've been doing a good job all these years, and it was the economy's fault that kept things from happening. I was listening to a person the other day telling me about how he felt regulations kept us from moving forward here right now. I was like, no, sir. 9 years the situation has been from the economic downturn of 2007, 2008. And as a matter of fact, the city almost bends over to make sure and give everybody as much chance as they can to get moving forward on stuff they'd like to do. So I was like, man, he might not have understood. And then I realized maybe if he was able to get the Planning Commission goals and the rules and regulations and things like that. So I came down here today to see about picking them up, and there were no extra packets up there. So I was hoping I could get the report on both of those things in the old-fashioned hard copy kind, because he's an old-fashioned business guy here local. I don't know if I could send him an email, but I know I can stop by his business and say, hey, look at these. So I'd like to get a couple of copies of those, but right now the office is closed over there. So I was hoping for your goals that you could tell the city, now's the time, because they got money running out of the pots, they're able to throw it left and right, to open up the planning department Monday through Friday, 8 to 5 again, and get us all back on track. And then that'll be a positive thing. If it comes from you, they'll be like, wow, okay. If it was just a customer, they'd be like, oh, we don't know, that's difficult. But last but not least, entitlements. Interesting word. When I was young, I didn't understand the context of it from the development and the building approach. But once I spent way too much money going to some classes and learning, I know that entitlements are the forever. And once you get the entitlements, you're set to go. And that's what it was all about, getting those entitlements. But what's been happening a lot of times is people don't have the entitlements and they haven't finished their files and they just want to keep coming back. Keep saying, oh, we'll do it another year. Yeah, okay, next year. I think you ought to have a time limit on the numbers of extensions you can get on a project. Shouldn't be more than 3 years. Once you start getting past that, it's like, wait a minute, folks, this may be a whole new thing, and it needs to be relooked at. So keep that in mind. I can't stay for Sandalwood, but you already know how I feel. They don't need an extension. Get on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Okay, I don't have any other cards, and I don't see any other members of the public in the chambers, so I'm going to go ahead and close public appearances and move on to Planning Commissioners' report. Any reports by Planning Commissioners? Not seeing any. Go ahead and move on to department reports.
Just attention that we will not be having a Planning Commission meeting on August 25th, so our next meeting will be September 8th, and we will, I believe that item will involve the Terrazzo residential project, and in concert with that, at the direction of the commission and at the interest, we will also set up a field trip that's concurrent with that agenda. So just to give a heads up that September 8th will be the agenda that we're looking at to combine a field trip associated with one of the projects. That's
And
all.
we're still thinking we'd begin at 2:30 for that field trip, so
Correct. Does
commissioners can
does
be,
that still work?
works for me.
if
I
we
just want
start
to
at
make sure
2:30
everybody
on
keeps it in
September
mind
8th?
for next time. Is that okay? Okay. Okay. Next, statements of abstention by commission members. Hopefully not. Okay, thanks. Before we move on to our report item, I'm going to suggest that we do a reorganization of the agenda and see if we're interested in moving the public hearing for the time extension for Sandalwood up to number 8, so that we can have our discussion and not kind of hold them up. So would somebody like to consider that and make that motion?
I'll make a motion to move item number 10 to 9. Swap.
To 8.
To 8?
Yeah,
Oh, to 8, yeah, you're right.
that's the hard part, is the numbers. Okay. Do I have a second on that?
I will second that.
Okay, and motion by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Crocker, and your votes. And that passes with 4 ayes, Commissioners Gronica, Dipple, and Duggan being absent. So we'll go ahead and hear the public hearing for the time extension for the Sandalwood subdivision map. It's not marked as such, but I believe it is an ex parte disclosure. Any ex parte?
No.
Okay.
No.
No. Okay. I visited the site, and that's as far as I got. Okay. And Susie Murray is staff, and we'll give the staff presentation.
Chair Cisco and Commissioners, the project before you this afternoon is a 12-month time extension request for the Sandalwood subdivision. The project that was originally approved subdivided a 2.43 acre parcel into 17 individual lots, 16 of which would have single-family dwellings, 1 of which would be developed with a duplex. There were actually 2 mitigated negative declarations associated with the project, and it also required a rezoning from the RR20 to the R16 single-family residential zoning district. Excuse me. The site is located at 1130 Gordon Lane. You can see by this aerial that it's surrounded on 3 sides by similar residential uses, and to the west is the fairground and the parking lot near the park, or near that fairground. Project history: it was originally approved back in 2006, and then in 2008 the city granted the first 12-month time extension, and then through 2009 and 2016 there was a series of assembly bills and Senate bills that automatically extended the expiration date for not only the tentative map but the associated conditional use permit. Earlier this year in April, the grading permit for the improvement plans was issued, and if for those of you who have not driven by the site, I do have some photographs, but construction is underway. They've almost completed their improvements. The subject application requesting the extension was filed in May, which stayed the expiration date, which was in June. So the general plan land use for the area is low-density residential with 2 to 8 units per acre, and it's surrounded to the north, east, and south by similar land use, or the same land use, and then to the west of it is the public institutional. Part of the original package, the original project, rezoned the site, and here you can see it's in that R16 zoning district. In terms of environmental review, the project scope hasn't changed, just an extension of time. I mentioned that there were 2 mitigated negative declarations adopted with the original approval. One was for the tentative map and the conditional use permit, which was adopted by the Planning Commission, and the other for the rezoning, which was adopted by the City Council. And up here, we have a copy of the tentative map, and I believe it's lot 14 that is the duplex lot, which is bordered to the east by Carroll Lane, which will extend through now. Here are the elevations that were, well, some of them were approved with the tentative map. The duplex elevations will still be required to get design review approval. Here are photographs that have been taken since July 20th. The one on the bottom was taken July 20th. The two on the top were taken a little bit more recently. And as you can see, they're well underway. I don't think they've done any paving at this point, but I think that all the subsurface work has been done. Pursuant to the zoning code, all noticing has been done. We've heard a couple of inquiries from neighbors, and it says no comments were received. I did receive comments from PG&E this morning that says that there might be some power lines in the area, but I'm hoping that they've been found and there are no unresolved issues. So with that, it's recommended by the Planning and Economic Development Department that the Planning Commission approve a one-year time extension for the Sandalwood subdivision tentative map. I'm available for questions. I believe the applicant is stuck in traffic between the Novato Narrows and Petaluma, so I'll do my best to answer on their behalf as well. So,
Okay, any questions of staff right now? Okay, Commissioner Cropper.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wonder if you could just clarify, I know Mr. DeWitt has left, but if you could just clarify, he was seeming to ask or request a maximum number of times for an extension, which I believe is 4 for tentative maps, and here we have just 1 prior, aside from the other state mandated or state directed extensions. So I wonder if you could just clarify that for him, if he's watching, or for anyone on the record, that we are in fact complying with the extension requirements of the tentative maps.
that is my understanding as well, that the Subdivision Map Act allows, or actually our city code allows for time extensions. That is in addition to the state authorized time extensions.
Great. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Okay. And yeah, Commissioner Edmondson. Don't
Sorry.
go away.
Sorry about that. So I'm trying to load the draft resolution here. I'm just wanting to clarify what our required findings are to go forward with the time extension. I certainly don't see much that's complicated about this, and in reading the resolution, it says that we are to find that there is no change of conditions that would preclude an extension. Is that basically the standard?
That's pretty much the standard. There's been some question about how we can condition time extensions, but because this project is already underway and their improvement plans have been approved, this one is moving forward. So yeah, there is some question with some of the conditions of approval, but we're still waiting for the determination. This one had no changed conditions.
Okay, and
So-
that's a statutory, this is the statutory finding that we make.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Is that the statutory? I'm going to consult with. There are no required findings in the zoning code. I guess that's the answer. There are no required findings in the zoning code
I see.
for time extensions.
Okay, so maybe this is just a little broader than we need to get, but what necessarily is the role of the Planning Commission? Obviously, we need to approve this, or disapprove it, but why is that the case if there aren't any findings to make and no standards to determine that have been met or not met?
Because it would otherwise expire, and when an applicant submits a request for time extension, it does give the city an opportunity to look at the project. And there are a few things that we know we are allowed to condition water efficient landscape ordinance
Okay.
is one, LID or stormwater management.
Great, okay,
So
that makes sense.
in this case, those, whatever changes happened were already done or are already being implemented, so.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
You bet.
Okay, great, thank you. Okay, this is a public hearing. I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing. I don't have any cards on this item. If any member of the public, you want to come down and speak on this item? No? Okay. So, no members of the public are wishing to speak on the item. I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to the commission. Somebody like to move a resolution for the purpose?
I'll make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa granting a one-year extension of time for the Sandalwood subdivision tentative map located at 1130 Gordon Lane, file number EXT16-0015. Waive further reading of the text.
I'll second.
Okay, so that resolution was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Crocker. Any further discussion, questions, comments? Want to make any? Okay, great.
If I may, just make one clarification. Ms. Murray is correct that there is no findings or process requirements in our zoning code, but it is in the city code, and it's titled 19 subdivision. So there is very limited in terms of a set of findings. It's really an evaluation of circumstance change, but it's Title 19 as opposed to Title 20, which is our zoning code.
Okay, great. Thanks for that clarification. And I don't have any comments either, other than it was so interesting to read the past minutes. I remember that meeting so well. So anyway, okay, so with that, we have that moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Crocker, and your votes, please. And that passes with 4 ayes, Commissioners Gronica, Dipple, and Duggan being absent. That concludes that item. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and move on to our report item, continuing to discuss our Planning Commission goals.
Yes, thank you. So at the last commission meeting, we introduced an item to discuss our annual goals as a commission. And one of the things I neglected to do at that meeting, which I am going to now have time for, is to set the context upon which the commission is setting goals. And one of the main context is obviously within the city's vision. And the city's vision is set by a number of different principles, but of course of which are directed by the city council's goals. And so one of the things I provided to you tonight, and these are items that are available on the city's website and the city council webpage with regards to the council goals, is those very goals. There's 6 of them with objectives numbered underneath them. And that sets a framework for the city moving forward, and also sets a framework for setting priorities where you have limited resources in terms of staff or budgeting. So that's a tool to think about when we're setting our commission goals. And then in addition, and this is also on the website as a link to the City Council goal webpage, it's the report that was produced in March of 2016 this year, and it was a report that itemize and discuss what was the result of a workshop, City Council goal-setting workshop on February 9th. And out of this exercise is what has come out as the top 5 priorities of the city for this year. And so you often hear staff reference, the 5 top priorities being, Roseland, infrastructure, homelessness, housing for all, and medical cannabis. So hopefully that added up to 5. But we often, as staff, are referring back to how even these projects that we move forward to you through the commission and ultimately through the council, how those fit into those priorities, and those priorities fit into the city council goals. So just trying to provide broader framework for moving forward. And the commission is obviously a very important piece of that puzzle in terms of implementation and policy direction. So that I neglected to mention at the last session, so I apologize for that. But that is definitely something that I know that is something that we've kept in mind as we're developing these, and we did in our last venture. So I won't go through it in detail because you have the draft resolution before you, but my attempt here was to listen to the discussion of the commission and try to reflect in writing here. We talked a lot about opportunities for this year. So the goals may be very little change in terms of what we want to accomplish in terms of moving certain standards of training and openness and coordination with other boards and commissions. Those are sort of recurring goals, but we also talked about opportunities this year, about how we might be able to touch onto those. And so I've added those opportunities into this resolution as just a discussion, for the sake of discussion and direction from the commission. And then as we move into what this might look like in a final form, doesn't have to be on this resolution, but some discussion about how to get it done. We all have limited time and resources, but we all have this shared interest to do this. And so just want to put that out there that as much partnering as we can do with our time to implement these ideas would be much appreciated, I think, and we'll have great success in actually getting these accomplished. So that's all I have to say. This is really your work plan, so I'm here to just help facilitate what this looks like.
Okay, so let's just kind of have a broad discussion. We don't have to go one by one. Any comments, changes, concerns about what's been captured here?
No, I think Claire did a good job of capturing the conversation. I went back through my notes from that meeting, so it looks like we hit a lot of it. There was one thing that I had brought up at that meeting that I don't see it specifically in here, but I didn't expect to see it specifically in here. I wonder if it falls under these other categories, is this notion of the Planning Commission being more involved either through subcommittees or some other form in these long-range planning community exercises that are going to be coming over, the general plan amendment and things like that, and also just the process improvement, and how is it that the Planning Commission can become a partner in that, so that it isn't just staff feeling like they have to do it, but that there's also an opportunity for the commission themselves and some members of it to have input into that. So I don't know if it would fall under some of these, as a broader category of that, or if there's just an option or an opportunity for us to your point, Claire, about how can we sort of work together on this. I'd like the commission to be, my personal feelings, I'm not speaking for the commission, I'm speaking for myself right now, but as a commissioner, I think that there's opportunities for the commission to be more involved in some of that long-range planning. So I'll just throw it out there and see if it sticks.
So maybe add something about exploring options or opportunities for subcommittees to participate with staff in the general plan update, different types of things.
Long-range planning,
Long-range
I think.
planning.
Yeah, I think that's
So maybe if we just put explore, that'll give us a place to start.
I was trying to see if there was just a way we could put it under one of these 4 goals.
Well, one of the things that I would like to see at the beginning is, Claire is setting the framework for us, and I think it's important, whenever we're considering our goals, we fall from what the city council goals are, and we support those goals. So I think in terms of this resolution, and particularly, you know, with Dwayne DeWitt coming in and bringing up the fact that other members of the public aren't necessarily cued into what our goals are, I think it would be important to have a sentence here at the beginning. We're establishing a work plan, and that work plan is to support existing council goals, to support staff in their process improvement campaign, because I think that will make our goals make more sense. I think it will also help the public see, oh, I can go back and see how this frame compares, how are they supporting those goals. So is that clear, Ms. Hartman, what I'm asking for? I think right at the beginning where it says establish a work plan, and understanding that that work plan supports the city council goals and supports staff. In the past, our work plans have always had that support staff, support city council, and I just think that helps point the public back in that direction to other documents that we're falling from. So there may be a piece there to tag onto. This is how I got started on that whole thing. Do you see something that...
No, it makes sense that it's there to support existing council goals. Obviously, our work plan has to align with council goals. It's not a freewheeling opportunity for us to do what we want. So I just wanted language in there that sort of, I mean, when I say long-range planning, that's a council goal. General plan amendments are council goals. I mean, all of those things are council goals that I think fall to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission could certainly be a strong component of advancing those ideas early on rather than when we finally get it at the end. So if we could put it under that item number 1, some language that in supporting that long-range planning and council goals, something to that effect.
Yeah, I think if I would suggest, I think that's exactly where it fits nicely. It doesn't fit necessarily in these other ones, but at that number 1 where it has the overarching sort of direction and push, and then maybe a sub, just like we have for these others, a sub one would be to explore the opportunities to participate through subcommittees or these, because I think that's great to add that if the commission's committed to participate, and that's a lot of your time, and I think putting that in your work plan shows that you're interested in doing that, you're willing to participate in this, a subcommittee type of effort in addition to other things, and I think that's where I would suggest putting it.
I like it.
Okay, any other comments? Mr. Edmondson, anything else you want to add to that? Okay, because otherwise, I mean, I think this work plan definitely does support the city council goals and staff's efforts in their process improvement plan. So I think with just those adjustments, it'll just make it a lot more clear to the public as in reading this resolution and to us. Okay. So can we go ahead and adopt that resolution with those changes, or do you feel comfortable that that'll be fine?
I do.
Okay.
I'll make a resolution of the...
Oops, wait a sec.
No, I won't.
You certainly may. I was just going to clarify to make sure that we understood what was said. And what I was understanding is that under number 1, there would actually be 3 bullets beneath that, which would be to support existing council goals, second, to support staff in process improvements, and third, to support long-range planning or to explore opportunities to participate in long-range planning. Is that accurate?
That's perfect.
Okay.
So now I'll make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa adopting the Planning Commission goals for 2016 with the amendments outlined by Assistant City Attorney.
Second.
Okay, so that resolution was moved by Vice Chair Stanley with including amendments, seconded by Commissioner Crocker. Your votes, please. And that passes with 4 ayes, Commissioners Groninger, Dipple, and Duggan being absent. Directly following that, we will look at, I guess it remained number 9, Planning Commission Rules and Regulations. Get a staff report on that.
Okay, so we're going to just jump right into that work plan. We're going to try to accomplish one of those items. So the ink is still wet on this, but what we're looking at for this next item is in our resolution, 4A, perform an administrative update, and one of the first tasks there is update the Planning Commission rules and regulations. And actually, our Secretary Sandy Bliss has spent quite a bit of time taking a look at coordination of our existing planning rules and regulations, which sets order of a format and protocols for how we conduct our meetings, and trying to find some coordination with some of the changes that have happened over the last few years since we last amended this. And so just want to appreciate her work in helping that coordination and doing a red line version of that we can go through and talk about where those changes came from. And I'm not going to go through each and every one because this is an administrative cleanup, so a lot of this is just outdated language that we need to update. But just for one, is we've changed our rules of discussion. We used to do Robert's Rules of Order. We've been doing Rosenberg's Rules of Order for at least the last couple of years, and so that's not reflected here, so obviously that's something that we want to change. There's other changes, such as we just established the work plan for the year, and I think the existing rules talk about a January to January type of cycle, and one of the challenges is with that, especially if you have a change through the council process, is after the council election process, there's an appointment process, and so sometimes we don't have a fully seated commission in January to set that calendar's goals. And so the suggestion here in this amendment is to move that to June so that we can coordinate with a couple of things. One, we have an established commission that can actually put together this work plan and for the following 12 months, but also be mindful of our budget process as well and understand what kind of resources are available to the commission that year and appropriate accordingly in terms of what you think, how we might fold into council goals and our budget. So those are the things that kind of jump out at me. If you have any questions, we can walk through those specific amendments.
I had a couple I wanted to add.
Okay.
And for the same reason that it's difficult to do things from January, because we don't necessarily have a fully seated planning commission yet in an election year. Under organization, on number B, it says that we're supposed to elect a vice chair for our first regular meeting in January, and sometimes that's been awkward. The only time it's awkward is when it's an election year, and so I don't know if we can change language to reflect, be a bit more vague about it, or just say the first meeting in February always. But I know it's been a problem because sometimes we're not all chosen yet, and yet we're electing a vice chair. So any suggestions about how that could be configured differently?
Has it not worked in the past where it says if it can't be held in accordance with the schedule, it should be at the next regular meeting?
Well, I guess that.
Well, that's not, I think that's if it,
Is that like if there's
Still
not a
might be
quorum
in
or something?
January. Sometimes we've been fully seated and changed over in November. Their rules are that they seat us in February. They haven't always followed those. I don't know. It may not be a big problem. I just know that it tends to be awkward when it's an election year. So
I guess one question I would have then for the commission is, it says, it's pretty specific. It says the first regular meeting in January, we could make it a little bit more general and just say in January, but if it never happens in January, then we should say it in February and then have that follow-up sentence. Protect us when we don't have a fully seated commission. We have the option of doing it in March or whenever we can, the next available. But I can't recall.
Isn't
if we do it in
February
regularly in
when they're all
January.
supposed to be selected? So-
Yeah, that's their,
So why wouldn't we have it in February when we know that we've at least passed the deadline, and we may not have a full commission, but
But we
I guess
could,
that's the
change it to
downside.
February and then keep
Yeah.
that second sentence.
yeah.
at least it would be more realistic.
And everyone is seated. I don't know how we can break that. It's possible that, so in the event that the election cannot be held in accordance with the schedule, I don't know if we want to add some other caveat that when all the seats are filled, or I don't know if we want to.
I don't know that we have to do that.
Restrict, yeah.
I don't know that we have to
vacancy.
be so strict as to say that all seats will be filled, because sometimes council members take a little bit longer.
Sometimes they take a
And the
lot
downside
longer.
is that their appointee won't be part of the vote. As long as we have a quorum, we can do it, right?
Yeah, okay.
But it
Well,
might be good to have a quorum of more of the newer people that are going to be there.
That's why I
than the-
would say
Because
in
we
February.
we remain seated until we're replaced, and that's awkward too, but that's how it works. So
Yes.
you could have somebody that's leaving, voting for the vice chair before the new people are seated, so.
Yeah, but I don't know that we can, we could keep putting this out. What if some council member takes
Well, I'm
3
just saying,
months?
February is
Are you
when
okay
they.
with this?
Yeah,
we'd be
that's
more
their
in a-
deadline.
We'd be more in alignment with their deadline if we said February, and then we
Okay.
work out continuing it until.
I mean, the
it
only
makes
way we
sense.
wouldn't have the vote is if 2 meetings got canceled in February, right? So we would end up with one of those 6-minute meetings where we we came in and had the only agenda item was.
We're not going to have those anymore.
So one suggestion is just to change out January to February
Yeah.
and keep the remaining.
Yeah,
I think that's fine.
I think that's at least a start.
Okay.
And then the other thing I noticed under 6 meetings, it says a particular meeting shall not be held at or after 2 as specified by the chair. And I was wondering about, our meetings are at 4, how that 2 got there, why it's there. Should we change it to 4?
Where exactly are you?
I'm on
Oh, the second
Page-
page.
6A.
6 meetings, A, the first sentence.
Okay.
Is that because sometimes, I don't remember a study
So-
session, but if
Well,
there's a study
There
session.
used to be
We
study
can look at the
sessions.
wording so it's not confusing to maybe a member of the public who might do this research and think, why aren't you regularly starting at 2?
Right.
So we might look at that, but just as I mentioned our upcoming meeting, having a field trip, we are going to be meeting at 2:30. So
Right.
the idea is to provide that flexibility, notice that it could happen, and that's all part of our normal protocols, but it may be that we could look at the wording to be more clear.
Yeah, the way that it's written does suggest that you meet at 2 on a regular basis. I would suggest that you change that. One option would be to change that to 4, which is your regular time, but then to add, or as otherwise specified by the chair.
Yeah,
So then it gives people notice
that makes more
could
sense to
be-
me.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion on our rules and regulations, those that are being changed, others that you want to take a look at? Yeah, Commissioner Edmondson.
Sure. Just because it came up in the last meeting and this time around, although, this time around, we moved around an agenda item to be more convenient for the applicant. In theory, in last meeting, we had a number of internal kind of matters that we had on the agenda that we put before the scheduled item. So in terms of the mandatory language, let me locate it again, in F of the meetings section that says the order of the meetings shall be as follows, and obviously we can reorder them with a motion up here, but it might be nice just to add the flexibility. I have no problem with this order in general, and there's no need to go crazy and different, but to give the flexibility to the staff to reorder the items as they see fit, and then that way the commission wouldn't have to go through the motion process.
Did you have a suggested way to put that
Sure.
together?
After the word shall, we could put unless otherwise determined by staff, or unless.
Generally?
Yeah.
Generally
Generally.
be as follows?
Yeah, I think generally is a good way to do it. Either way, I think has the effect that I would be looking for, which is just to let the staff exercise some common sense and,
Thank you so much.
No,
Thank
which
you
you
for that
always
assumption
do.
that we
No,
have
no,
common
really, no,
sense.
I think that's a great ad, because there are times where we wish we could do it, but we have to wait because of the way it's written to do it at the meeting, and then we don't have the ability to give advance notice with predictability to the public. We can just say, we're going to make this recommendation, we don't know if they'll actually reorder the agenda. So that's that's definitely a logistical improvement to add flexibility.
Great, thank you.
With
And
that
then,
flexibility, you can talk with the applicant ahead of time and make sure that they're prepared for that as well as the public. Okay.
And then it also, at the lower part there on F, so it says the order shall be, and then we'll say shall generally be, and then after the items, it says the order of the agenda may be changed as appropriate, so I think the only edit we have to make is the generally. Everything else, that flexibility is there, whether the commission is reordering or staff can proactively address appropriate order.
So not to throw.
I'm sorry, Commissioner
No.
Edmondson, I interrupted you. Did you have anything more you were going to say? Okay, Vice Chair Stanley.
So what happens if there's an item on there that we just don't know is a community item that's got a lot, that people show up because it's number 8, and then we're going to take and reorder? I mean, if you do that prior to the meeting, sometimes we walk in here and I'm surprised to see 30 people in here for maybe something that we didn't think was going to be a big item. So they showed up, and then we start reordering, and you've already reordered it, as opposed to how we do it now, which is we come in here, we sort of see that there's a lot of things that nobody's here for, but there's an applicant waiting through 3 iterations of it. That's happened at the last meeting. How would you deal with that if you're doing that prior to showing up at the meeting, if it's happening in the morning or the day before?
Well, I can tell you, I'm going to follow the general order 99% of the time, because I think predictability of how items are scheduled helps build an understanding of how we are conducting government. So trying to be as consistent as possible, I think, is most helpful for the general public to follow how we do this. But yeah, I think if there's on the occasion, such as today's agenda, acknowledging the scope of the first of that item versus these, and know that we'll spend some time on these work plan items, probably would have invoked it had I had the flexibility to reorder the agenda. But I think certainly there needs to be some predictability in how we set these up, some protocols. I think this is it, and this is what we have done, so that's good. But giving that flexibility, and I know Chair Cisco often is engaged in the room and consults with the commission, and oftentimes the audience that's here, and sometimes makes an adjustment. But I think it's the anomaly, not the norm, to make adjustments on the fly, because people are scheduling their time to attend. If it's a very long agenda, they may not arrive until 7, because they're the last of a very long agenda. So we don't want to be mixing it up too much and
Right.
missing the opportunity to hear from the public.
Okay.
I think that, the time that we reorder it mostly is when there's been obviously it's going to be continued so that we can get it off the table. I think we'd be in trouble if we try to read the room and decide, well, this one has more, people for it or whatever. I think we just need to go in the best possible order that we can. But that's typically when we've reordered, is when we're cutting something completely loose. But definitely, and we don't have reports that often where we're having a discussion that's probably of no interest to.
Right, those are the ones. It's the report items
Not that
and
it
because they
shouldn't.
show up first.
Yeah, and so these last couple have been sort of an anomaly, just because we don't typically have those kinds of discussions. Not that we shouldn't have more
Except
of
the
them.
last two.
The last two, exactly. So, but I think making sure that that staff has that flexibility it's just good, so they can decide.
Okay.
I would just point out, if
I
I
have a
may,
question. Oh,
Go
through the
ahead.
chair, that the language that was proposed, that will give staff flexibility to order the agenda, but it also still leaves you with this discretion to reorder it once you're here that evening, so.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Crocker.
well, that was just what I was going to say. I feel that right here where it says, or the order of the agenda may be changed as appropriate, satisfies what we're talking about, and also in number 10, the chair may modify the formats in appropriate circumstances. I feel like it's already there, in my opinion.
Okay. Okay. Any other points? Anything staff wants to clarify, tell us, suggest? No? Okay. So I think we have a resolution on this one too. Somewhere. Okay. And you have those amendments? We don't have to repeat them, do we?
No, I think we have two amendments. One is to change the vice chair election to February, and then to add generally to item F, which talks about order of the agenda.
The time of the meeting.
And then another one, yes, under meetings, at or after 4 o'clock, or as specified, otherwise specified by the chair, is the way that reads. I guess my only recommendation is, first of all, I think to reflect a common practice, if there's no items, then we won't go ahead and notice, and we will only have one meeting that month, so maybe some flexibility by saying by the chair and/or director or executive secretary, adding, so it's not just the chair in terms of setting the time of the meeting, or whether or not you're going to have 2 meetings each month.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So would somebody like to move a resolution capturing that?
I'll make a resolution of the Planning Commission of the City of Santa Rosa amending the Planning Commission rules and regulations and modifying sections 2C, duties of the chair, 5, parliamentary rules, 6E, meetings, and correcting a typographical error, and to include the 3 amendments as related to staff.
Maybe you shouldn't count them in case there were more. Okay.
Second.
Okay, so that was moved by Vice Chair Stanley, seconded by Commissioner Crocker. And your votes, please. And that passes with 4 ayes, Commissioners Gronica, Dipple, and Duggan being absent. And I believe that concludes our business. We will be adjourning to our September 8th meeting. So with that, we're done.
Most of our workspaces don't have four walls or a desk, but there's a lot to be done to get this place up and running. It takes a big team to cover so much ground. Each space is unique, requiring its own special method of care and service. And it's of utmost importance to see that it happens each day, because our workspace is your leisure space. And it includes 950 acres of Santa Rosa. It's the parks, the trees, the fields, the trails, special gathering places, community spaces, and it belongs